Okay, we are live, but we got to let it breathe just for a moment here. We'll bring on Mile High Huddle Facebook, the group, MHH super fans, and then we're going to get cooking here. Stoked, and we're good. Welcome in, everybody. It is the Mile High Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, and with me, as always, my fellow football priest, who you know, who you love, Zack Kelberman. Zack, I thought it was a little bit like coitus interruptus when Mel Kiper unveils his latest mock draft. And who do the Broncos take at number 12? A cornerback, Quinion Mitchell. A little piece of news, however, might be pointing, if this were to happen, it might point away quite conclusively, Zack, from the possibility of the Broncos drafting a corner in the first round. Free agent visit, break it down.
Yeah, so Levi Wallace is coming to town tomorrow on a free agent visit, undrafted out of Alabama in 2018. He's a seventh-year veteran. He has 12 picks and 54 pass breakups in 70 starts with the Bills and the Steelers. He's nobody's idea, Chad, of a long-term cornerback too, but if they do need someone experienced in that secondary, behind PS2 is Tamari Mathis, who can't be relied upon, Riley Moss, who's too inexperienced, and then people you've never heard of like Art Green and Reese Taylor. So if anything, just for experience sake, I would be on board with bringing aboard Wallace. And if it pushes the Broncos away from going corner at 12, I say get it done. That's worst case scenario to me, Chad.
Same here, man. Same here. I mean, in a vacuum, no, let me put it, this is a better way to put it. In a perfect world or in almost any other draft, I'd be like, oh, hey, Kiper saying Mitchell's his number one corner. Cool. Broncos landing at corner number one with their first round pick, the guy that's the top corner by some estimates in the class. I'd be stoked on that, Zack. But in this situation, we know that if Patrick Surtain hasn't been enough to overcome quarterback incompetence, Von Miller hasn't been enough, Justin Simmons hasn't been enough, Quinion Mitchell's all of a sudden going to be the guy that equalizes and levels the playing field? I don't think so. Got to get a quarterback. So Levi Wallace, bring him on in, dude. I mean, last year with Pittsburgh, started 9 of 16 games, couple of picks. Bring him in, dude. Like competent, plausible veteran corner.
The argument I see in Broncos country for taking a corner at 12, whether it's Mitchell or somebody else, is that they need defense to combat the firepower in the division with Mahomes and Herbert, etc. But the best way to combat firepower like that is to match it, at least in my opinion. The quarterbacks that can go toe-to-toe with Mahomes are the ones that are going to overcome Kansas City. And the only one that's vanquished Kansas City in recent years has been Cincinnati. They did that because they had an elite quarterback in Joe Burrow who can go toe-to-toe with them. So nothing is going to matter. They can have 4 all-pro cornerbacks, but if they're missing that QB one under center, it's purgatory continues.
It's kind of like mutually assured destruction, right? Relative to say world politics and the way the arms race works and whatnot. You know, it doesn't quite apply in a perfect, Zack, apples to apples thing as far as Broncos Chiefs or Broncos Chargers. But yeah, I mean, fighting fire with fire is probably the best way to look at it. But if you, I mean, hey, great game last year, that home victory over the Chiefs. You finally snapped the streak because dadgummit, nobody beats the Broncos 17 times in a row. But let's face it, dude, all those times the Broncos came up short, those 16 times in a row, if you had some actual quarterback competency, probably 50% of those you're winning, 50%, you're probably splitting. Maybe not quite as much depending on the caliber of quarterback, but at least competency. It's kind of like I want to segue to this other topic that kind of points to what we're talking about, but we've had some super chats, superstars jumping in. We don't want to keep them waiting any longer. So let's grab Sam Bam, who is jumping off the top rope with a very generous super. Thank you, big dog. You know we love you. He's saying, evening, Chad, Zack, Scott, and Broncos country. 2 weeks until the draft. It's getting closer. Always feels like forever for the draft to get here. Also, here's a little something extra due to UConn winning it all Monday night. Go Broncos. I was thinking about you, my dog. Like I said that night, hey, I'm for Sam's sake, I'm happy, Zack, to be a UConn fan for one night.
Yeah, and Sam, you didn't have to do that. It's obviously very much appreciated, but your interaction each and every podcast is more than enough for us. But you definitely help keep the lights on, as Chad likes to say all the time, and it's completely, honestly, 100% true. Thank you.
Yeah, brother. Thank you. Really excited for you. And I finally met somebody who, and I can even say, yeah, I know somebody who has actually turned in a college March Madness prediction that it was correct. It's so rare to get those right. But thank you, big dog. David McElrath, the Papa Bear, jumping in too early, saying good evening to everybody. MHH for life. Buckham ×3 Broncos, and he's still on the. Wait, hold on. JJ McCarthy or Nix train. Zach, that's what the Papa Bear's saying here.
Interestingly enough, David, the latest scuttlebutt about JJ McCarthy has come from Paul Allen, the Vikings PA announcer, who's obviously plugged into their organizational plans to an extent. And he's been saying all day that Sean Payton is so desperate for a quarterback in this draft. He says he likes McCarthy, that he might even trade PS2 in a deal to move up. And then I read another thing about McCarthy that said, I think it was from Schefter. He did a radio hit today and said that McCarthy's range is more 8 to 12 than it is 1 to 4. So if you want McCarthy, David, as I do, then the signs are looking a little better for the Broncos' favor.
By the way, we're really excited. I mean, we got a chance to hang out with David at the meet and greet last fall, but we're going to have him on the show as a superstar segment guest on the 29th. So the last Monday of this month, it's going to be a guest. We can't wait, David. So excited for that. And thank you again, my friend. So Zach, back to the topic at hand. Well, actually, no, we got to grab the wrong. First thing, with some very, very generous stars showing out, flexing, doing the Ronk thing. We love you, big dog. Thank you so much. And we can't wait to see what some of your thoughts are on this very topic I'm about to drop here. But Zach, Jordan Reed, who is a ESPN draft analyst and a great example of someone who kind of climbed up, as it were, through the blogging, digital media ranks to get all the way to ESPN. Really cool story. He had an article, in one of these kind of ESPN roundtable things, where every kind of local beat writer on the NFL beat, so to speak, kind of tenders a little segment, right? Well, when it came time for the Denver Broncos, you had a little segment from Jeff Legwold, legendary media guy in Denver. And then he does Reed that up with the following. And it's a quote. It starts with, quote, "No way Sean Payton goes into the year with that quarterback room." That's how an AFC executive summed up draft expectations for the Broncos, who are expected to address QB at some point over the course of 7 rounds. But will it be early or down the board? Bo Nix has been a popular match for Denver this month, and considering the Broncos are without a second-round pick, but do have 6 day 3 selections, I could see them trading back from number 12 before selecting their signal caller of the future, close quote. Now, Zach, there's a lot we can actually talk about here, but the most interesting aspect to me is that anonymous AFC executive saying, no way does Sean Payton go into 2024 with that quarterback room as is.
Well, I got to be honest, my whole world has been turned upside down by this development, Chad. It's startling. It's groundbreaking to me. The fact that Sean Payton wouldn't want to go into a season with Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci. I mean, going out on quite the limb, Jordan Reed's part. So that's kind of my feeling is I even put it on Twitter with like the exploding head emojis. This isn't anything new, in my opinion. Everyone knows the Broncos are desperate. Everyone knows that Sean Payton is not satisfied. And you don't have to have inside sources or talk to an executive. If you follow the Broncos' lack of moves at quarterback, you can plainly see, as we have documented, Chad, each and every podcast, the reality of Denver waiting until the draft to solve that. So you're muted.
If that's what an anonymous executive, hey, what's up, Doug? Good to see you, big dog. Thank you for the stars. Love you on Facebook, my friend. But if that's what an AFC executive is telling him off the record, there's no way Sean Payton goes into 2024 with that QB room as is. How do you then make the next logical or illogical, however you want to look at it, jump to So they're going to trade back at pick 12. They're right in the middle of the action right now where they actually could, get one of the top quarterbacks of the class. Like they're within striking distance, even if they don't trade up. You could still, odds are, Bo Nix will be there, Michael Penix will be there. You trade back even to like 19, I would say your odds of getting even one of those two guys probably cut in half because the Raiders are right behind you. We could get into it. But how do you go, Zach, from AFC guys said that to, and so they're going to trade back? Wait a minute. So what you're saying is they're confident enough in their quarterback room as is to say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and stockpile picks, and probably as a result of a trade back, odds are end up taking a Michael Pratt, a Spencer Rattler, a Joe Milton. It doesn't really make sense to me. He kind of contradicts himself a little bit there.
Well, here's how I kind of metabolize it. How often do I get on here when we talk about national media discussing the Broncos and say that's why he's not local? That's why he doesn't understand the ins and outs of the team, because he realizes the Broncos have a general manager in George Payton, a general manager that historically loves to trade back and stockpile draft picks. I guess what he didn't realize, though, is that the general manager is that in name only in Denver now. George Payton is really not calling the shots. It's Sean Payton. And historically, if you looked at what Sean Payton did in the draft, he always moves up. All the tea leaves, all the smoke, all the indications lead us to that conclusion. So I don't understand it either, the notion of the Broncos trading back.
Kind of curious. We'll get more into it here. But let's see what the Duchess has to say on this. Wow. Just a couple of days removed from her appearance on the show. Love you, Michaela. Thank you for the very generous super chat. Mount Rushmore hashtag. She says, groundbreaking news. Yeah, right. And hens lay eggs. Who knew? That's right. Extra, read all about it. Hens lay eggs. MHH, the best community. Thanks to people like you, Michaela. Love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela.
You're awesome. But yeah, hey, as soon as Zach, I read anonymous exec on the subject of the Broncos, and I'm like all ears. I want to hear what it is. I want to read what they're saying, right? Like, I'm here for that. But yeah, there's nobody, and agreed, there's nobody that really expects the Broncos to march into 2024 with Jarrett Stidham as QB1 and the only other option, Ben DiNucci. So then you get out into the weeds of, okay, well, technically this AFC exec, Zach, he's not saying, and so they're going to draft a quarterback in round 1. But simply the implication really boiled down is that at some point, like in the 7 rounds, as Reed said, they'll take a quarterback. But how in any way, shape, or form are you moving the needle if you're waiting until round 3 because you don't have that second round pick? Phil, what's up, dude? So good to see you. Love you down in Tucson. He says, good evening, Chad, Zach, and Deacon Scott. Well, Kuiper is smoking some good stuff, but there is some who think it's possible taking a corner at 12. If that happens, then I think Payton has a QB picked later. Hashtag Buckham MHH for Lavco Broncos. I don't know, man. If that happens, yeah, you don't exit the draft does not conclude, Zach, without the Broncos having taken a quarterback somewhere. But it's a massive white flag on the season if you do not draft a quarterback there. And I got to believe, Zach, that, as much as he has still maintained the faith and support of ownership, the Walton Penners, we're talking 8 straight years since you missed or since you've been in the playoffs. Okay. So you're telling the fans, you're telling everybody, hey, including your own team, odds are we're going to make that 9, live to fight another day, and see what it looks like for us in round 1 next year. Well, I'm not 100% convinced Zach Payton would live to see another day, so to speak. Like it would be a huge gamble.
I think the only way that you go corner at 12 is if you exhaust every other possibility, meaning you can't trade up for Drake May. You can't trade up for McCarthy. Maybe Bo Nix gets sniped ahead of you and you don't want Michael Penix. So you fall back on a corner. But even then, I would look at edge rusher. I would look at defensive line. I would even look at offensive line before I would address cornerback when you already have a Pro Bowler back there that is waiting on a new contract. That's the least, I think, Chad, of the Broncos' major concerns.
Well, and not only that, but you did invest a 3rd round pick in Riley Moss last year. And, he albeit, spent a good chunk of the season injured, but you didn't really get him on the field defensively. I mean, here and there, a few snaps the last 2 games or whatever, but not really giving him the opportunity to go out there and sink or swim. And don't you want to see what that's about? I mean, you have a couple of guys back there that, could compete and offer you a little depth if Moss sinks and doesn't swim, but it's not a DEFCON level, situation. Danny, what's up, dude, on Facebook? Thank you, bro. Says, what's up, guys? Hope your night's going good, and really hope we get our guy Bo Nix. Go Broncos country. Yeah, dude, always going good over here, my friend. Bo Nix, the more and more as we inch closer and closer to the draft, Zach, the more Bo Nix becomes to me like one of the ideal fits. Is he a perfect prospect, like total objectively speaking, for all 32 teams? Is he Andrew Luck? Is he Trevor Lawrence? Highly coveted? Obviously not. But in terms of fit, once again, like it's hard to argue that he's not the best fit possibly for Sean Payton at quarterback.
Yeah, Danny, we've obviously had this discourse for weeks and debating whether Bo Nix should be the guy, will be the guy. It's kind of like, at least speaking for myself, car shopping, where if I want 3 or 4 different cars, I can talk myself into cases for each car. So if I end up with any of them, I'd be happy in the end. That's kind of where I land right now when it comes to quarterback. With the top 4, 5, 6 guys, if Sean Payton signs off and if they emerge from day one of the draft with one of those quarterbacks, I can make a case for why they could be successful.
So OG's, Sam Bam, what's up, bro? Again, thank you. Number 2 super tonight after already top roping it. He says, side question, could you possibly see Caleb Williams pulling an Elway or an Eli Manning and not signing with Chicago, which would throw a curveball to a lot of teams' draft plans? That would be interesting. If so, no, just because like most, in the case of Elway, it was more an organizational incompetence thing and a fear of going that far east. When push came to shove, like he and his family, his dad, they really didn't like. It's like, hey, if my son's going to go that far away from home, then it better be either in a major market, Zach, or with a competent team on some level. In Eli's case, it was more the idea of small markets. So Baltimore, as far as media markets are concerned, small market, smallish back then market. San Diego at the time, small market. That was more what the Eli thing was about. It wasn't about, team issues or whatever. It was, hey, he's a Manning. We want him to be in a major media market. So you look at what Chicago, what is it? Scott, it's probably like the 3rd or 4th biggest media market in the United States. Yeah, there's some organizational incompetence, Zach, but I couldn't see the Williams camp going, you know what? I think we ought to force your way out of Chicago if they take you number 1.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Caleb Williams fan. I tend to find myself cringing at some of the stuff he puts out on social media. I think he's a hell of a quarterback, though, and I don't see why he wouldn't want to go to Chicago. It's a pretty good situation for a rookie, number 1 overall pick, throwing to Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet. You have a solid defense. You have a ton of support after they moved on from Fields. I don't see that happening, Sam. Caleb Williams will be the number 1 overall pick to Chicago.
We also have Mike Edel from the top rope jumping in. Thank you, Mike.
Wow, Mike, thank you.
Another Mount Rushmore member of this community. You can feel the excitement for the draft building because, as was mentioned earlier by Sam Bam himself, we're officially 2 weeks out. So very, very cool. He says, does Mike, and thank you, Mike. Good evening, Chad, Zach, and Scott. I live in Minnesota, and Paul Allen played an interview from former Vikings GM Rick Spielman saying that Vikings were going to overpay to get J.J. McCarthy, and Allen thinks he knows something. Who knows? Go MHH. Yeah, so an interesting topic here, Zach, if you want to. You touched on it earlier, but, Minnesota, they have a little bit more in the asset draft capital department to maneuver and kind of throw their weight around in this year's draft, at least more so than the Broncos. So if they were hell-bent on getting JJ McCarthy, you could get all the way up to 4 and get him, but it's going to cost you an arm and a leg.
Yeah, I did. I mentioned this earlier, Mike. Thank you for bringing it back up and clarifying that it was Spielman saying that and not Paul Allen. Paul Allen was just facilitating that quote. But it definitely holds some water when you consider the connection between the Broncos and Vikings with George Payton, who came from Minnesota. And, in talking about the trade up, Scott and I actually talked about this on a pod while you were gone, Chad. Obviously the Vikings can offer more draft picks this year, but from a player asset standpoint, what can the Vikings offer except for Justin Jefferson? That's better than the Broncos offer of Patrick Surtain, if that were to close the deal. I'm not advocating to trade PS2, but in terms of the player assets, I don't think Minnesota can match.
We shall see. Mike, thank you, big dog. Appreciate you so much. The Ronk jumping in again to say the Broncos are bringing in, yep, we touched on that, my friend. Levi Wallace, veteran corner, former Pittsburgh Steelers starter. I hope he gets signed, because if he does get signed, odds are it's going to be at a relatively team-friendly deal. The Broncos will find a way to afford it easily, and it removes more that compunction, that urge to go cornerback at pick 12. But Zach, something interesting here. So OGs who know a little bit about the history of MHH and kind of where I came from, the original community I hailed from, much like you guys in the chat right now, commenting, we're here talking, and on the site we're writing, and we're doing this and that. And right now you're in the comments contributing to the conversation, etc. I used to do that as well at a publication called It's All Over Fat Man, which was owned and operated by the great Emmett Smith, a.k.a. Doc Bear. That's what he's known by. Great mentor to me, a great inspiration. And we, of course, stay in touch and talk quite regularly, Zach. And I wanted to, Doc's eye for things football, and especially when it comes to any coach, quarterback, system, any of those subjects that are tied to West Coast offense. And on the subject of Nix, okay, I want to read a couple things. He says, this was a conversation between Doc and I. Quote, in college, Nix was called on to basically go for 6.3 yard. That was his average last year, gains as a passer. Fine. He was good at it. He's a top flight, accurate thrower in the short game. Most Broncos fans want a quarterback, really, when it comes down to it, who fits Payton's needs well enough to let the team make full use of Payton's fertile offensive mind. If he believes Nix has the processing speed and abilities he requires, the ideas of some of the draft Nix who don't, like, for example, it was Kuiper saying he doesn't see Nix as a round one guy, don't amount to a hill of beans, Zach.
I love anything fertile, Chad, don't you? It's a good use of that
No
terminology
doubt about
it. by the Doc. And, it's funny that you brought up his second point. I was going to say the same thing. Isn't all that Broncos country wanted was a quarterback last season, and even in 2022, that saw the short and middle parts of the field that can make the easy throws and keep the offense on schedule? I know Nix doesn't have the strongest arm, and you're going to lose some of that moonball magic that you had with Russ, but it's more important to be consistent on first and second down and not have to back yourself into a corner on third down. It's better to just march the ball down the field and be consistent in the red zone rather than rely on a 40, 50-yard Hail Mary that Cortland Sutton somehow comes down with. There's a lot to like about Bo Nix. Is he QB1 of this class? No. Is he a future Hall of Famer? Maybe not. But can he work with Sean Payton and make the Broncos offense stable and successful and competent? Absolutely.
Amen to that. Man, just when I'm like starting to get comfortable again with Facebook's the way they have their what do they call it? The business manager set up. They went and changed things. So now, like, when I want to jump in and see the star stuff, I know, Scott, you take care of that live, and it's obviously very helpful, but you can't just jump in and see it now. It's so stupid. It irritates me. Cody Dub, what's up, brother? Thank you for the super chat, my dog. He says, do you think a 2025 first can get you to the second round this year? Any day. I mean, almost in every case. Yes.
Yeah.
Edge or Mitchell at 12. Trade back into the second if Bo is there. So I mean, I think if you look, Zach, at the Bo Nix or the Kuiper mock draft. All right. He's talking about how Nix, I don't view him as a round one guy. Broncos take Quinion Mitchell, yada, yada. Nix goes on to be the first pick in the second round. Now, I think it was the Giants, if memory serves, or whatever. Anyway, okay. If you're the Giants and you patiently waited and you felt like the deck just fell perfectly in your favor, every domino, and you're about to take Bo Nix with that pick and the phone rings and someone is, going to offer you a first round pick for that spot next year, unless it's like pick 25 through 32 or something, you're probably still going to make that trade and move out and say, here you go. But what's your answer for him here when he's talking Edge or Mitchell at 12, and then, find a way if Bo falls to trade back into the second round?
Well, here's my problem with that. And yeah, 2025 first can get you back into the second round, but that would mean that you're doubling down on the capital that you're using on Bo Nix. You're surrendering a first and using a second round pick on him. Why not just take him at 12? Why risk it? Why draft another position and nonetheless cornerback, which is not a top 3 need for the Broncos right now. So maybe Cody would just see differently on this. I'm of the mind that it's almost quarterback or bust in round 1 if you are 99.9% confident in Bo Nix and you're a little less confident he's going to be there in round 2. Just take the plunge, take the chance, and ensure that you get your guy. No player, no prospect, Chad, is more important than quarterback. I'll die on that hill.
Well, especially on the heels of 8 straight seasons of missing the playoffs. The primary reason being quarterback incompetency and quarterback instability. Like, at a certain point, you're going, you have to go back to the well. Now, Zach, if this was the type of class where, it escapes me what class I can compare it to right now off the top of my head, but let's say a class, Zach, that has 1 or 2 first round caliber guys and they're getting swooped up in the top 5, and the Broncos just don't have the capital to move up and try and be one of those 2 guys. Then, hey, you do what you got to do. I mean, you make hay best way you can with the tools that are given to you when it's your turn to make the pick. But that's not what this class is. This is one of those quarterback classes, Zach, where if you're a quarterback needy team and you don't partake in this class, you're going to end up looking like John Elway did for staying out of the 2018 party when he had every opportunity to waltz on in there and become the life of the party. I mean, he's still paying for not drafting Josh Allen. You could also have taken Lamar Jackson in that draft and opted not to. So I just can't fathom the Broncos as QB desperate. And it's not just, Zach, the fact that it's 8 straight years of no playoffs. It's also the fact that a million different little kind of contextual factors, not the least of which is Broncos plausibly, objectively speaking is a better way to put it, having the worst quarterback room in the league right now. How do you then, Zach, talk yourself out of not taking a quarterback in the first round when as many as, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but as many as 6 Qs could be taken in this class, 5 of them, well, 4 of them, let's just say, before you even go on the clock at 12.
Here's what I don't get, and it's kind of humorous to me. And I'm not trying to single you out, Cody, because a lot of Broncos fans feel the same way. Trade back into the second round and take Bo Nix. Well, let's do an exercise out loud. What do you think the Broncos record is going to be in 2024? Probably not great. It's probably going to be a top 5, top 10 pick. So if you wouldn't take Bo Nix at 12, you're going to give up a 2025 first to get Bo Nix. That's going to become a top 5, top 10 pick. It makes no sense. If you like him, take him. Simple.
Cody jumps in again, and thank you, Cody. We love the conversation, by the way. This is so dope. And of course, support means the world to us, big dog. He says, you're also in the best quarterback division in the NFL. So you're going to need edge and cornerback. That's one reason. Yeah, that's a fair point, and I do get it. Hey, I don't disagree with you, Cody, that, you're going to have the weapons required to wage war against the likes of Mahomes and I'm going to guess, Zach, a kind of revitalized Justin Herbert with Jim Harbaugh landing in LA. But first things first, that's on the defensive side. Like, it doesn't matter. You could, Zach, let's say you had pick 12 and pick 13. Or no, let's just say you have pick 12 and you take whatever player is like the next Von Miller, and he turns out to be that kind of player. Cool. And then your third round pick, the next time you draft, you take a corner who happens to be as good as and is the next Patrick Surtain. You're still dead in the water, my dog. It avails you not without a quarterback. So you got to remember that. This is a team that is literally dead in the water right now without a quarterback.
Thank you, Chad. I don't have to imagine it, Cody, because we already lived through it. Since 2016, the Broncos had Von Miller at edge. How did that avail them against Kansas City? Now, since 2021, the Broncos had Patrick Surtain. How has that availed them against KC, or overall? How many playoff games have the Broncos been to or won? 0 with Patrick Surtain. Nothing else matters until you get your quarterback.
Indeed. Danny Powers jumping in on Facebook. Thank you, my brother. He says, I just want the Broncos to get back to the winning ways like it used to be. So whatever it takes to get back to that, I'm game for. Just getting pumped to see what happens in the draft. 2 weeks. Let's go. Yeah, we're on the home stretch, as it were. But, this is kind of, coaches like Payton, offensive-minded guys, they don't miss the forest for the trees. There's occasionally those coaches, Zach, who almost believe the headlines and think they're so smart that they're just going to constantly do the thing that nobody expects them to do. And the only guy that it ever kind of came out in the wash positively for, it really, over time, was Bill Belichick. Yeah. Most coaches, they see the issue, especially offensive-minded guys. Like Mike Shanahan had Jake Plummer, got all the way to the AFC title game and just wasn't satisfied, drafted a first-round quarterback the very next year. Sean Payton knows that, like, hey, that was bad enough watching Russell Wilson run around and get sacked 45 times and just not getting the ball out and getting strip sacked and throwing the picks. And I just can't take that. Maybe I was hopeful that Jarrett Stidham could come in and, move the needle, but he wasn't. Like, whatever your read on him was, Zach, if Sean Payton's praise about Stidham when he first arrived was anything less, or I should say anything more than, putting in the lip service for a guy you just brought in and kind of helping to sell him to a new market, but talking about how he's a starting caliber guy that's never really gotten his shot, and we see that in him. That's put to bed, dude. Sean Payton knows, like, his whole thing about scheme, offense, producing at a prolific level, putting points on the board. That ain't happening with either of the guys you have in the quarterback room. It ain't happening if you take Quinion Mitchell at 12. It's not happening if you take an edge. You have to take a chance on a quarterback, period, end of story. And it sucks because, Zach, it does kind of put them real close to that borderline of, it's not that far removed from draft a quarterback for the sake of draft a quarterback territory, which you definitely have to be like wary of, and you have to recognize it and make sure you're not falling too prey or too close into that bucket. But it's so dang close, dude, that you could like reach out and touch it. That's how bad the situation is in Denver right now at quarterback.
Yeah, Dennis Woods hopping in, $5 super. Thank you so much, Dennis. It's good, so good to see you as always. Dennis goes, I don't think a big arm is that important. Short to intermediate passes is what moves the chains. That's Nix's strength. Still like JJ Moore, though. I'm with you there on all counts, Dennis. And one thing I can add to your point, Chad, is if Sean Payton, if the game passed him by, if he was out of touch, if he didn't know which way the wind is blowing in the NFL, he would have kept Russell Wilson for one more year at least and try to make it work and prove that he can be Drew Brees 2.0. He realized, though, that it's not going to cut it with Russell Wilson. He's getting up there in years, and it's all about fresh blood at quarterback in the NFL. And that's why he's been so aggressive in scouting the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks in this year's class, to the extent that he's almost psychologically terrorizing them by showing them bad plays and putting them through gauntlets psychologically, mentally, emotionally, not just physically, everything we've heard so far has indicated that Sean Payton will move heaven and earth to get a quarterback because he realizes he ain't going to win squat without one.
Yeah, and it becomes, guys, even more of like a comparative arms race when you are that offensive mind that Sean Payton is, and you are looking across the division and you see Mahomes, Young, Herbert, Young. You see a guy come in who's an offensive minded guy like you in Harbaugh. You're going, look, I can't just sit here twiddling my thumbs and go back to the podium on April, whatever it's going to be. What's the Monday following? The 29th. Because that's when David's going to be. I can't go back to the podium at Dove Valley on April 29th and have any chance in HE double hockey sticks of selling a plan to the Broncos country and the local media that we're going to go give them hell with Jarrett Stidham and the best cornerback in the class. Good luck with that, my dog. Good luck with that. Good luck with selling tickets.
Right.
Good luck with concessions, parking. You're just going to become even more of a doormat. You're going to become more of a lampoon. You're going to trash your own kind of not resume. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm kind of having a brain fart, but your own profile, your own whatever legacy. Sorry, geez. I don't see it. Sean Payton, we got to give him the credit, give him at least the credit that he knows, which, you go, which way is the wind blowing? Oh, we go that way. Lawrence, bro. So I've been noticing in rebuilding, teams that are successful get best players on the board, bring in the quarterback later. I would like to know give me some examples of this specific tactic, Lawrence. He says, what are your thoughts on waiting a year to build the team better and get higher picks by going at it with a building team? Zach, do you have an answer for Lawrence here?
If I'm interpreting this correctly, he's basically saying punt on 2024, then get a top 5, top 3 pick in 25 and build from there. I'm not really a fan of tanking or giving up, especially with a coach like Sean Payton, who I don't think has that mindset. Even though he has cushy job security, he wants to win now because what's on the line? You mentioned it just 2 seconds ago, Chad, his legacy, his reputation, and we all know how important that is to him. Also, you mentioned good luck selling tickets. The Broncos are going to lose money if they don't get a quarterback. You know who hates losing money? The owners of the team, who've made a crap ton of it by selling things and appealing to their audiences. So there's a lot of pressure on the Broncos to be at least competitive in 2024, and that's why you've got to come out of the draft with a quarterback that you can build around. You might not finish. You still might get that top 5, top 10 pick, even with a rookie quarterback, but you can't just play scared or punt it down the road. To me, that's a kind of a coward's mentality.
And why would you in a draft class this replete with talent?
Yeah.
What is anybody afraid of? Oh, because you're out of range of Caleb Williams or Drake May or Jaden Daniels. If you truly believe that that's where the talent starts and ends, then okay, that's your opinion on it. But I beg to differ. Drew Brees was not a first round pick. All right. Had he been drafted just a couple years later, he would have been, right? Because then the expansion came and there were now 32 teams and he was the 32nd pick, but he was a second round pick. He didn't have, Zach, the strongest arm. He kind of had, I would say he had like a shade better arm in terms of strength than say like Peyton Manning, like just a little bit more, but not much. His whole thing and the reason it worked in New Orleans between him and Peyton was that he was the ideal fit for what Peyton's philosophy and offense really is. And that's the short game where you're smart pre-snap, you're seeing things, you're getting the ball out on time, you're very, very accurate in the short to intermediate to medium. You're not afraid to throw over the middle. And it's like, to quote Bo Nix himself, Zach, an extension of the running game, which goes all the way back to Bill Walsh and the West Coast offense and all that stuff. But that's what made Drew Brees and Sean Payton such an amazing QB head coach match. And this is not, Zach, me saying, and so watch out, Bo Nix is the next Drew Brees. But what I'm saying is Sean Payton, to make that kind of hay, doesn't need, the smoking cannon that is Patrick Mahomes' right arm. He doesn't need that. Guess who has a real strong arm? Russell Wilson. We'll go back and use that word again. We've both used it a few times tonight. How much did Russell Wilson's arm strength avail Sean Payton last year? Not at all, right? So it comes down to the other intangible, both tangible and intangible aspects of what he's looking for, including, Zach, what's going on between the ears and that quick processor, which, watch the tape, dude. Bo Nix has that. And he happens to have a lot more athleticism than people realize, I think.
You mentioned the running game. That also goes back to Peyton's time in New Orleans. How many great running backs went through the Saints? I mean, Pierre Thomas, Chris Ivory, Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara. How often did we see a running back catch a pass last year? And it wasn't just solely because of Russell Wilson dumping it off. There were intended routes that called for a running back to catch it. Sean Payton loves utilizing that. The Broncos have also, by the way, done their homework in the draft by bringing in multiple running backs on visits. They want to look to add to that backfield. So Bo Nix could come into a situation where he has a pretty decent receiving core, a solid ground game, and oh, by the way, one of the best offensive play callers of the last 20 years.
Exactly. Phil, thank you, bro. He says, guys, we are missing the obvious. Peyton's looking at DiNucci to take over. Only quarterback we haven't talked about, LOL. We all have our QB picks. Personally, Phil says, I want Michael Pratt. Tulane kid that, drew a lot of eyes at the Senior Bowl, Zach. That's what you'd be looking at. For example, if you took a Quinion Mitchell at 12 or, traded back or whatever, that's what your options are. You're going to get to the third round and you're going to hope there's a Pratt on the board just so that you can throw some fresh meat to the fan base of like a modicum, a shred of hope. Here's Pratt. Here's Rattler. Although I think Rattler has a significant more upside. He might have a much lower floor than Pratt, but he likes Pratt, and that's cool, man. To each their own. Beauty, much like quarterback opinions, in the eye of the beholder.
It is certainly a take, Phil, and I disagree with your. Is this really your QB1 in this class? I mean, you want Pratt over McCarthy, May, and the rest, or is this like realistic if the Broncos pass on one of the big four? I don't know that it'd be meat that you're throwing to the fan base. It'd be like a spoiled can of Spam, Chad, because I don't see Michael Pratt's upside in the NFL lasting that long. He'll be a great coach one day, similar to Brett Rippon, but a long-term franchise QB1 that can go toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes and the rest, I don't see it, but we'll find out.
That's the thing. Again, Phil, to each their own. I see Pratt as kind of Trevor Siemian part 2, and there's some utility in that. Like think about like this, Zach. When Kubi before now I'm really stretching my I'm really kind of pushing the limits of this Pratt thing, but think about this for a minute, okay? When the Broncos had a competent offensive coach in Denver, Gary Kubiak, they were able to win some games with Trevor Siemian, right? So there is that. You could go, well, hey, if Kubiak could pull it off and get 8 wins out of Trevor Siemian as a second-year guy, he wasn't a rookie, right? He was a rookie in 2015. But if he could get 8 wins out of Trevor Siemian, well, hey, maybe Pratt could make similar hay with a Sean Payton, but there's one thing you might miss in that calculus, Phil, and that's this. Siemian, yes, he had Kubiak, just like Pratt would have Payton, but what Payton and Pratt would not have that Kubiak and Siemian did was basically a man-for-man, almost, minus Malik, minus Danny Trevathan, redux of the Super Bowl 50 defense. And that, let's face it, is more deserves the credit and the reason why Siemian got 8 wins in his year 1 as a starter than strictly the Kubiak Siemian magic they were able to create.
Scott made me laugh on the side chat, and I want to bring it up only because it furthers my point. He says, at 3 a.m. with my beer goggles and dim lights, damn, Michael Pratt looks good. But I mean, it might be true. We've all been there. But I don't want to have to put on beer goggles. I don't want to have a dim room and it being 3 a.m. I want my franchise quarterback to look good at any time, to perform at any times. I don't want to have to bandage and duct tape together a franchise QB. I want a no doubt elite alpha there. And Michael Pratt to me is not that.
And by the way, Phil, this is not to dismiss that you like Pratt. By the way, this is good. I mean, just the fact that you like him creates a really fun discussion that ends up going on to take up like 5 or 7 minutes of this tonight's conversation and makes us think about, historical context. How would it fit? Do you got the defense to support a Pratt? Things like that makes for good conversation. So appreciate you, dog. Danny, again, thank you, buddy. He says, I just want to thank you guys for having Mile High Huddle so all us Broncos fans can talk about our team, because there's sure a lot of Seahawks fans here in Montana. LOL. So thanks again for having this channel for us and taking time out of your day to do this for us Broncos fans. Much appreciated. Well, thank you, Danny. And I know it's not easy for, Montana's kind of a weird thing. Idaho's similar to what I'm about to say, but like, because of the TV market deals, the western half, let's just say, of Montana gets whatever the local Seattle TV market is. And the eastern side gets the Denver TV market. So eastern side, Zach, they're getting Broncos games every Sunday. Western side, they're getting Seahawks. So you kind of have a pretty you have a palpable line that separates. But I would still say Montana, by and large, from a majority perspective, is a Denver Broncos state.
Well, I can't speak to the demographic breakdown, but I can speak to Seahawks fans, and I can't stand that bunch. So I definitely sympathize, and I wish nothing but the worst for them, Chad, Seattle, and I think our boy does as well.
I wish nothing for the worst, or nothing but the worst. Okay, guys, we're at 47 minutes, so we're about out of time. Any burning topics that we haven't touched on tonight, get it in the chat here, and we will do our best to get them before we dip on out of here this evening. I want to grab this from, so Jared Cook, he had an article today titled NFL Insider Sheds New Light on the Broncos Plan to tackle the, well, actually, I'm going to shift gears on this. I'm going to go back to the Rick Spielman thing, Zach. That came from Paul Allen. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me. I'm going to try and find this. I want to see exactly what it was he said before we are out of time. So this is Rick Spielman. Okay, here we go. Overpay. Now I need the actual quote. Where is it?
I could try to find it for you.
See if you can find it, and I'll just go back to the chat. I just want to get the actual quote on the show. Ronk, brother, thank you so much. Good to see you tonight. Love the conversation. And Mike is very much convinced that, for what it's worth, Bo Nix is going to be something. I think Bo Nix has a really good upside in the league as long as he lands in the right situation. You could argue that for almost any quarterback, but there's certain prospects, Zach, like, hey, 1983, John Elway, wherever he landed, he was going to be a guy. Peyton Manning, wherever he landed, he was going to be a guy. I would say that Mahomes, wherever he went, he was going to be a guy. You might not be able to say that about Bo Nix, but one of the places I could see him really thriving, Denver.
Yeah, I think it's the place that he can thrive the most, at least right away. You can argue whether his ceiling is shorter than other quarterbacks in this class, and I think it is, but his floor is definitely higher. And if there's a QB that Sean Payton's attracted to from an intangible standpoint, from a mental standpoint, it's got to be Bo Nix.
I love this from Phil. He's like, hey, dude, I just wanted to start an argument about Pratt, and it worked. I love it, dude. It's like you kick the hornet's nest and kick back and watch and see what happens. Like sometimes when you're thumbing through YouTube Shorts or Instagram or TikTok and you see those dudes, those people that do that for a living, like when you come out from winter out your back deck and you see this corner that you haven't seen since before the snow, and oh my gosh, there's this huge hornet's nest, and you got to call someone or whatever. Those guys that come and deal with it, sometimes that can be entertaining to see what happens when you poke a stick in those hornets' nests.
I dropped the quote in the side chat.
Okay. Last thing, and then we're dipping here. From former Vikings GM and, of course, best buddy of George Payton, Rick Spielman. Right? Is that what we're talking about here? Okay, yeah, Paul Allen. So, quote, they're so desperate out Denver way. That's a weird way of saying that. They're so desperate out Denver way. That's like my Nana's Nana. That's how she would talk. Out Denver way, they're pretty desperate. I'm not kidding you, man. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, we want that 3 so badly. We will give you pick 12. We will give you next year's first rounder, and we'll give you Patrick Surtain. I'm not kidding you. They're that desperate. So the third, he's talking about the third overall pick, Zach.
Yeah.
So that's what he said.
Yeah, there was another interview with Spielman as well. It might not be the same one, but it's basically the same drumbeat about Sean Payton's desperation, quote unquote, to get a quarterback. And it's been no surprise. We've heard for almost 2 months now about how enamored Payton is with JJ McCarthy. So interesting. Muted.
Dude, I don't know what's going on with my keyboard. Twice tonight, it's muted me without me muting, actually touching the button. I think maybe the batteries are going dead on it. But great conversation. Thanks, guys. So much fun tonight. Couple messages, then we're going to get out of here.
Tremendous installment, as always, of the Mile High Huddle podcast. If you're not doing so, please follow us on Twitter at the MHH Pod. You can follow the main account on Twitter, if it will load, at Mile High Huddle. Chad at Chad and Jensen, myself at Kelberman NFL, and Scott, our producer, at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some merch like we're rocking each and every podcast, check out mhhmerch.com and get you some. You can also find us on Instagram at mile_high_huddle. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure you're leaving your football priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some merch each and every single month. But if anything, y'all, please subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you. A little clunky, but we got it done.
A mile high salute and a special shout out to the great Super Chat superstars and supporters tonight. Sam Bam, David McElrath, The Ronk, Doug Raquel, Phil McLaughlin, The Duchess, love you, Michaela, Danny Powers, Mike Edel, Top Rope, Cody Dubb, multiple supers, Dennis Woods. Did we get Dennis? I'm not sure we did get Dennis. I don't think there's a big arm. Oh yeah, we did. Okay. Dennis, love you, big dog. Also, no surprise you love JJ, right? You're in Michigan, my dog. I like him too for what it's worth. Lawrence, that covers everybody. Lawrence Rivera, love you guys. Zach and I will be back in the saddle on Sunday. And we will have we'll be doing the drawing for the jersey giveaway that night because, of course, I was gone for a minute. Then I come back and Scott was gone. So we're going to do the March jersey raffle Sunday night. Book that on your calendars.
Have a great weekend. We'll see you Sunday night. Take care. And as always, go Broncos.